Hello one, hello all. This is the Many Saints of Gabagool, and I am the host, JR. Today, I will be covering Counter-Strike Condition Zero, a first-person shooter with some stealth elements, developed by Ritual Entertainment and published by Valve. Well, there's more to the development than just one studio's involvement, but I'll dive into that rabbit hole later. This is the second game in the popular multiplayer FPS series, Counter-Strike. And unlike the first game, Condition Zero contains a single-player mode that has not been done again in any other installment to this day. To get it out of the way right now, I won't be covering the first game in great detail. Since CS, or CS 1.6 as it is currently known, is multiplayer focused, there's really not much to analyze, but I can give it a once-over real quick, as this will apply to Condition Zero, to some extent. This section is for those who don't have much knowledge on these games, but either way it will act as a good basis for what I've got in store later. CS 1.6's gameplay centers around teams of counter-terrorists versus terrorists, usually up against real players, but you can mod the original game to have AI bots. I guess it's all up to you. You are dropped into a map with a general set of objectives, which varies depending on the game mode you chose to play. One game mode is Hostage Rescue, focusing on CTs, well, trying to rescue hostages, while the terrorists prevent the CTs from doing such a thing. Next is Bomb Defusal, where terrorists are tasked with planting a stack of C4 at a designated bomb site, and the CTs must defuse the bomb with a defusal kit if the bomb is planted before it explodes and kills everything in the universe. Okay, maybe not that last part. There's also Assassination, where the CTs have to escort a randomly chosen player, the VIP, to an endpoint without the VIP dying, and of course, the terrorists are meant as a deterrent to this goal. This game mode is really only restricted to one official map in CS 1.6 as of now, since the game mode sounds like it blows, at least to me personally, though I say this as I've never even played it. It's worth mentioning at least. Each round ends when every player on one side is dead and or one side completes their specific objective. If you die during the match, you can only spectate until the next round begins. At the beginning of a new round, players have money they can spend in these buy zones that you automatically spawn in at the round start. This money can be used to buy new weapons, ammo, armor, projectiles such as grenades and flashbangs, and special items that are needed for certain game modes, like a bomb defusal kit. Your inventory here is a little limited, as you can carry a knife, 2 firearms, and a projectile, though defusal kits work automatically, meaning these don't take up inventory space and you don't have to select it directly. Okay, in essence, that's Counter-Strike, and it's only a formula that has thrived and expanded since it got its start as a mod for the first Half-Life, initially released as a beta all the way back in June 1999. The main mod team behind it, Min Lee and Jess Cliff, would later be hired by Half-Life's developer, Valve Software, to commercially release CS as a proper game. And the series is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, competitive games to this day, with its latest release, Counter-Strike 2, formerly CS Global Offensive. The franchise hasn't seen many entries over the last 20-ish years, with only 5 titles total. Well, that's not entirely true, as there have been spin-offs, such as CS Online, a port targeted towards the Asian gaming market, and a port made specifically for the original Xbox. Among all this counter-striking, some games get a little drowned out in the sea of this franchise, like the Xbox port. Condition Zero happens to be one of them. Okay, to be clear, this game isn't necessarily obscure, as it is still decently known in the community, and it hasn't been lost to time. However, it is one that doesn't get brought up as much as titles like CS2, or even CS Source in some cases. That's where I, and some other YouTubers for that matter, come in, because I've got some thoughts about this installment. When necessary, I will be bringing up Half-Life in general for certain instances, since, after all, there would be no Counter-Strike if there was no Half-Life. Well, and also because there's a lot of similarities and comparisons to be made between the two, especially since the two games run on the exact same engine. Now that I've established some context, we can finally dive into Condition Zero and what this single-player focus is all about. Since this is single-player, we have a story on our hands. Well, barely. To be fair, other games in the series can be played with bots to make it a single-player experience that feels ever so vaguely like a multiplayer one. Though what's the point of that? This is Counter-Strike after all. Multiplayer is pivotal to this series. Or maybe you're like me who doesn't have any friends to hold LAN parties with. Or perhaps you don't want to get dominated by real players who have been playing these games for about as long as I've been alive. We're not here for any of that noise, mostly, as this is a proper single-player component. Yeah, let's do this. Oh wait, we gotta pay a visit to the training first. This tutorial acts as a counter-terrorist training course, because for the campaign, you will only be playing on the counter-terrorist side throughout. There's no campaign option to play as the other side, but no worries, I can deal with that. We learn how to play the game, and to any CS player that has never played this game before, you might want to give this tutorial a run, since it introduces some new gameplay elements, like some new gadgets. I'll touch on those gadgets at a later point, we're too busy speeding through the course. We learn how to move, shoot, and climb a set of pipes like it's a ladder. Okay. Damn, I guess they didn't include a course on how to surf. Oh well. We've got scientists dotted around the course, hanging out in the observation rooms. At least they look like scientists. I don't know why any scientists would be here watching my training at all. This sure as hell isn't Half-Life. And if it were, I'd have the HEV suit, and that suit would make counterterrorism work a lot easier. Even then, these guys are speaking more like drill sergeants than scientists.
The first moves you will practice are related to basic movement. Press your duck key to navigate under these obstacles.
Congratulations, we are now a certified CT. Let's go unleash some cold, hard freedom on some renegades. The campaign officially starts you out playing as an unnamed American counter-terrorist in a war-torn city located somewhere in Africa. We arrive by helicopter, but naturally, it is shot down and we are left on our own. The initial objective is to gun down any insurgent in our way and search for some other living soldiers from our team that had the foresight to not get shot down. After a time, we come across a lone friendly sniper, one we have to escort to a tower that he can nest himself at while we hunt down a rescue helicopter. Bleh. More importantly though, this allied sniper had a friggin' M60 stashed with him. How generous, don't mind if I do. Along the way to finding a chopper, we go America fuck yeah on some terrorists. Once we reach the landing zone where some of our guys are camped out at, we have to go back for the sniper, as he got himself captured while I was away. Wouldn't have happened if he had taken the M60 for himself, just saying. We backtrack, rescue the sniper, and backtrack again. For good luck, I gunned down one of my comrades standing guard at the helicopter, and because it happened on the level end fade out, the mission is registered as completed. Great job, everyone. The screen fades out and fades back in, now putting us in the boots of a German counter-terrorist, with the objective to track down and later rescue some hostages, somewhere in the Philippines. This mission initially has you maintaining stealth when finding the hostages, but once you locate them and radio in for reinforcements, you're free to mercilessly kill from there on. Well, for as long as the game throws vaguely defined bad guys at you. Okay, there's something immediately jumping out at me, and it's bothering the hell out of me. As you may have noticed already, you play as a completely different CT in each campaign mission. It's all based around scenarios rather than following an actual narrative. It's not even the fact that you play as an unnamed soldier, I don't have a problem with that, or the fact that there's virtually no story at all. Playing as a different guy each level is kinda lame, and somewhat subtracts the immersion for me. Yeah, that's definitely a nitpick, but I'd rather be just one guy, traveling the world and dropping guys in various locations. The world traveling doesn't even need to be as deep of an experience as a game like the original Deus Ex, just as long as I'm playing as one guy. I mean, I could always pretend I'm some magician masquerading as a counter-terrorist, teleporting from mission to mission in different parts of the world, but that wouldn't make me feel any better about the story. I'd just be making up excuses by then. Besides, I don't need magic when I have an arsenal of weapons. Blasting a guy in the face with a 12 gauge at close range is magical enough for me. Because you drop out from being one player character once the next mission begins, this leaves the fate of the last one unknown. I'm not asking the game to do this necessarily, but it would be a little interesting if, right at the end of the game, it would state what happened to each of these characters. Yes, it's a minor thing too, but it would help justify calling this single-player counterpart story mode. Like, you know those movies where before the credits start up, it shows text that details what happened to the characters we followed throughout the film after the screen fades to black? That's the sort of thing I'm talking about. I don't know, what if one of my previous characters went on to invent something that changes humanity forever, such as a type of popcorn that cures cancer or something? Or it could just tell me that my character died immediately following the mission. Better yet, how about that bit of friendly fire I engaged in earlier? I want to see, through text, how my character was court-martialed and spent the rest of his days in prison. But hey, we completed the mission, right? That was just collateral damage. Getting back on course, the whole single player is like this. No one character to play as, and thus no overall story. Not that I was asking for anything too layered, the game just doesn't give us much. To be fair, each mission has its own contained story, but none of them are building towards a larger arc. It would have been cool to see that all the guys we played as were fighting one big terrorist organization, but it's only revealed later that it's a global thing, and all the groups we fought to a certain point were different units within the organization. Well, anyway, there are other notable things within these levels that's worth bringing up. Let's take a look at those. In our continuing mission of going all around the world, blasting guys, rescuing NPCs, and defusing bombs, we've got some new toys and methods of saving the world from an arguably worse evil. Yeah, it's mostly in the form of new gadgets. We're not just disabling bombs anymore. Going through them, we have remote bombs, and as the name implies, you sometimes get these to make yourself a new entrance when the only way is blocked, or if you need to destroy a certain object, even though I feel like grenades would suffice some of the time. Fine, fair enough, there's still more. There's also tools related to the objectives directly. For example, a radio, used to call in for backup at specific points. And a normal camera, used to photograph some objectives. There's also this fiber optic camera that allows you to peek around corners without revealing your position during stealth missions. The stealth sections in this game give me hemorrhoids. While there's not a ton of them in this game, there's still too many of those missions or sections of missions for my liking. Because this game engine wasn't made for stealth gameplay, patrolling NPCs can easily spot you if they are facing you, sometimes regardless of the distance between you and the goon. Now you get a chance to sneak back into cover before mission failure, though these parts of the game really drag. It wouldn't be so bad if you had a chance to quietly take out some guards, but we don't even get that luxury. Whenever you take a guard out, whether he's alone or not, it immediately results in the mission failing. God, this stealth is the absolute worst kind. It can go right to hell. Oh, right, there's more gadgets. We've also got less destructive ways to get around the map, like a blowtorch that can be used on locks in front of locked doors or grates. I kinda dig the blowtorch, not gonna lie. But it has one problem that applies to every other gadget in this game. You can only use it when the game tells you. It gives you an indicator on the upper left side whenever you're in an area that requires the use of the indicated tool. That kind of blows, since some of these tools can make for handy backup weapons, or just fun to use to dick around with in the game. Hey, there's an enemy coming around the corner. Let me set down this explosive to detonate from cover. Or, I'm out of ammo and lost my knife. Let me melt this guy's face off with my torch. If you're feeling a little psychotic, you might think, look at this poor asshole I just clipped. That was a good kill. I'm gonna take a picture to celebrate the occasion. I should frame it too. Point being, the tools are a welcome addition, though the potential here is kinda wasted. The limited use makes them not nearly as fun as they could be. I mean, sure, there isn't much purpose to being able to kill a guy by burning him in the ass with a blowtorch, but having the option there would be welcome. Moving away from the gadgets with limited use, we also have gadgets with mostly unlimited use. If you've played CS even a little, a lot of these weapons here should look familiar to you, as every gun from 1.6 makes a return in this game, with some slightly modified textures and sounds. I think some of them had their stats tweaked, though I'm not 100% sure on that one. We do get a few brand new ones, like the M60 or a Law. Hell yeah. Though the inventory system has been drastically changed. In single player, anyway. Instead of being able to only hold a limited amount of weapons, the amount of primary and secondary weapons you can have on you is limitless, best I can tell. And this is along with your knife and projectiles. Oh yeah, you can carry 3 projectiles now. Neat. If you ever got tired of being able to handle just a few weapons at a time in CS, or ever had fantasies of being able to equip yourself like you're the army of a small country, then Condition Zero is definitely the CS game for you. Want to carry a Benelli M4 and an AK in your inventory? Yeah, go for it, champ. Shit, throw in a TMP while you're at it. Why not? You get the idea. Of course, it all depends on what you come across in a mission. That does mean you can't pick up any weapons that were used by a now deceased enemy, which also extends to ammo. If you want something an enemy was using, well, get lost, because the game says so. Perfectly fine by me. It's not hard to find new weapons or ammo. Carried over from CS 1.6, the ammo capacity for all weapons remain the same. Not counting the loaded magazine, you can carry 90 rounds for 5.56 weapons, and 100 for 45 ACP, as examples. I rarely ran out of ammo, the maps usually left plenty lying around. Even if you do run dry for one weapon, well, it's a good thing you'll likely have a backup weapon or 5. In single player, it is mostly reasonable as far as damage goes, though it still takes 2 headshots before a terrorist drops. One if you have a beefy enough weapon. Accuracy in this game is, frankly speaking, shit. Sure, it's real bad when you get shot. Even after you twitch from the gunshot and your view recenters, your aim is going to be off. You could be aiming directly at a bad guy while standing hardly a few feet away, yet you would still miss. If anything, in the event you're faced with a room full of firing squad of muzzles, it might be a good idea to stay close to cover. You're some counter-terrorist grunt, not RoboCop, and the game is more than willing to remind you of such a fact. Who knows, you might have a better chance of getting a good shot off if you got a face full of flashbang. All I know is that every time I started eating mouthfuls of bullets and temporarily obtaining the ability to aim like a blind person, I reloaded my game. It's not much better when not absorbing lead either. It can sometimes be a dice toss whether you hit an enemy or not. That includes instances like aiming down the scope of a sniper rifle. Alongside all of that, don't even attempt firing a weapon while on a ladder. You wouldn't be able to hit a dump truck at point blank range while mounted on a ladder in this game. It's not like health is that much of an issue, as I can take a decent amount of damage, but I can only still take so much. At that point, I could rely on the medicine cabinets or medkits located sporadically throughout the levels, spiced up by constantly quick saving and loading, but it wouldn't be worth it. Oh yeah, I suppose I should give a word to the healing items, especially the cabinets, as they're a little weird. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of how these cabinets work. In a similar vein to the health chargers from Half-Life, we use the medicine inside by walking up to it and pressing E. Unlike the chargers, you don't have to hold down the button, just tap it. Although there's technically 2 types of cabinets, represented by how much of it you're able to use up. There's the one-use cabinets, which depletes the entire kit, while the 2-use ones only drain half of the cabinet, with each use restoring 50 HP. The problem with these is that there's no visual difference between the two, so you could end up using a full kit when you only meant to take half. And this wouldn't be such a problem if I could just simply tell them apart, that's all I ask. There's usually a fair amount of medkits scattered around, so you won't be stuck with just the cabinets. This isn't an awful way to recover health necessarily, though I wish the cabinets worked in a similar way to the chargers. It is a good thing armor vests work pretty much like you'd expect, and overall, even on medium, you can tank some damage. Just watch your aim, like I already droned on about. There's not many other things that make this entry stand out from most other CS games. I mean, there are options for multiplayer, but there's not much else there that I can discuss in depth. A lot of the maps are carried over from 1.6, along with most of them being recreated in Condition Zero, and with both versions being made available in-game. As for the campaign, the level design itself is fairly basic, not much really stands out about the geometry or layouts to the environments. That being said, these maps are pretty to look at, and they represent real-world locations very well. For Gold Source anyway. One minor gripe I always had with Half-Life 1 was that, sure, the level design made the game flow very well, but a lot of places seen in the game don't look too much like places that could potentially exist in the real world. Granted, it's worse in games like Doom 1 and 2. Half-Life at least attempts to make places look like a real habitable location. I know the tech was a little limited at the time, and this is just a nitpick, I get it. It just always bothered me a little. It helps that these missions always have some junk and props littering the map, making each place feel properly lived in. Who knew an outdated engine could make levels look this neat? I guess this is nothing compared to what the Doom modding community is capable of these days. Either way, these maps are designed with some thought in mind, at least enough for an idiot like myself to navigate them without too much trouble, with some exceptions here and there. Just as one of the few examples, there's a later mission by the title Alamo, which is the typical affair of Navy SEALs versus terrorists. You know. After we are first dropped into the mission, we, and our squad, take out some vaguely defined enemies, and have to move forward through a building that's locked off. As one would guess, we have to be the guinea pig to find an alternate path. Though there's one problem. Where? Nothing hidden beneath any of this rubble, no stray vent off to the side, nothing. There seems to be a way to get up into that window, but how do I... Oh! Look! A set of pipes that, in essence, are a reskinned ladder, like the ones we saw in the training level. And it is the only other time this pipe climbing is used in the entire campaign. Okay, that's technically a lie, since there's a mission that has to be played directly from the world map screen that uses this once more. I'll touch on that level select more later. For now, however, this is crap. What's the point of giving me this pseudo-ladder if you're going to use it all of 3 times in this campaign? It wouldn't be as insulting if there wasn't a dedicated section in training for this. We learn how to move, shoot, and climb a set of pipes like it's a ladder. Okay. Well, besides that tiny bit of game design bullshit, these maps usually flow nicely enough. Usually. There were certainly times when I got lost looking for the way to progress, but no time was worse than that pipe climbing scam. It's still a treat seeing environments rendered naturally in Gold Source, relatively speaking, and it is a sight you don't see often, although I still see the cracks in places. By the time this game dropped, Gold Source was, give or take, 6 years old. In that time, there were plenty of advancements with graphics overall, though this is one of the few games on this engine that holds up graphically. Mostly. There's still some old, reused textures and models that pop up here and there all around the environment. It all blends in more consistently than turning on the HD models in Half-Life. It does tend to show its age a little more obviously in other ways, like the animations of various things, particularly the NPCs. You can clearly see how in the movements of many NPCs, where one animation ends while another begins. There are also plenty of scripted sequences sprinkled all throughout, some of them you have a hand in triggering. From time to time, a particular enemy NPC will stand in front of a wall or a pile of junk, and when you kill them, they fly back into the object. As cool as it looks, it feels weird seeing a guy get essentially tackled into a wall from a few 9mm bullets. I'm thinking this was supposed to simulate getting blasted by a shotgun, or high-powered rifle or something. There are also scripted events that you simply observe while going through some of these missions, usually a structure being blown to smithereens. I gotta admit, these look pretty cool, especially for a game that came out the same year as Half-Life 2 and CS Source. I'll touch on that point very soon, since this game had a hell of a development process. At any rate, it's clear that the devs were ambitious with these sequences, as awkward and kinda clunky most of them turned out. Overall, these elements mixed together makes the game feel a little stiff. If the game was developed in a more advanced engine, it could have potentially made everything flow better. This game was a real mess during development, spanning roughly 3 years and changed hands several different times. I guess we're lucky we got what we got for the final product. Matter of fact, let's examine how it went down, from start to finish. It won't be the most thorough look, but it will be enough for you to get the big picture. As a disclaimer, before I start, all info I gathered for this section came off the official Counter-Strike fandom wiki. I say this because fandom kinda sucks to use and the company behind it is shitty to its users, which makes me resent visiting the site. But there was no other place that had all the information stashed in a single spot. Plus, I made sure to check sources to verify that all the information is accurate, at the very least. Okay, that's out of the way. Time to rewind all the way back to 2001. In January 2001, the studio Rogue Entertainment was scrambling hard to find a project to work on after the then current one they were in the middle of developing got canned. They reached out to several different game companies, including Valve. This caught the attention of Gabe Newell himself, as he had been interested in seeing a single-player Counter-Strike game come to fruition, and that point was the most opportune time to make it happen. Valve would then go on to contract Rogue in April that same year to ultimately sow the seeds of what would become Condition Zero. While E3 was rapidly approaching by this time, things were still optimistic, even when Rogue went into overdrive to try and get a playable demo out by the time the event came around. Things took an unexpected nosedive soon after, only about a month into development, as the producer for the game on Rogue's side bailed. Everybody on both sides were blindsided, but on Rogue's end, they reassured Valve that everything was fine and dandy, and development would go on without much fuss. Well, Valve wasn't going to take this one lightly, and they now had concerns about if Rogue was even going to stay in business at this point. Valve promptly took control of Condition Zero and kicked Rogue to the curb. Damn, that's cold. Work was passed on to Gearbox Software around May 2001, since Valve and Gearbox had an established relationship, with the latter having worked on the expansions for Half-Life. Gearbox wrapped up work on Half-Life Blue Shift and immediately got to work on Condition Zero, wanting to make the game more arcade-like and non-linear, as they deemed a standard linear FPS structure to be boring. Early on in development of their version, Gearbox even hired several community members to help create maps, models, bot AI, etc. Progress on this version went smoothly for a while, being revealed to the public in August, and a release date of sometime in the beginning of 2002 stamped on it. This date was pushed back further along to that year, however work still went well, with the game being promoted and shown off quite a bit early on in 2002. That was until Valve decided that the arcade-like game structure wasn't good enough, and they much rather wanted a linear experience, kinda like Half-Life, causing the game to be pushed back even further to fall 2002. In July, Gearbox left to focus more on their own projects, likely insinuated by the sudden change in approach to Condition Zero. Another company out, and the game was left in limbo like before, though not for long. Like Rogue before them, the studio Ritual Entertainment had been working on a major project that had gotten shit-canned. Not to mention that in both Rogue's and Ritual's cases, this was caused by EA. Go figure. Ritual was desperate for another project to work on in early August, and it just so happened that Valve needed some other suckers to hand Condition Zero off to, and Ritual happened to be those suckers. After arrangements were made in mid-August, Ritual picked up work on the game, with Valve demanding that the final product is, essentially, Half-Life meets Counter-Strike. It was during this time that the music for the game was composed, which made it intact to the final game. Okay, I'm going to diverge for a second to give a word to the music, because I don't have a lot to say, and plus it technically has to do with development, so why not? The music to this game is... It has a very militaristic feel to it, consisting of a purely orchestral offering. By no means is it bad though. To me anyway, it feels too generic to be anything memorable. I can't say it's not fitting though. It was done by Zach Bellica, and if that name is familiar at all, he's done music and sound work for several different things, particularly many games. I know he can make some damn good music, though this game isn't a great example of what he's capable of. I certainly get tired of hearing the first few seconds of the menu theme, since it plays every time you open the game. Well, obviously. So yeah, music is good, but not too memorable or special. Anyhow, where were we? Oh, right. The project that would become the final game was sailing along like normal, with Turtle Rock Studios being brought in around this time to focus on multiplayer. If you hadn't already guessed from what happened to this project previously, things would go south once more. Ritual ran into cash flow problems in June 2003, 10 months into development, leading to many layoffs, a few of which coming from the team that was working directly on Condition Zero. Ritual was confident that they would finish the game regardless, but once again, Valve wasn't satisfied with the single player that Ritual was developing, even after having been shown off to the public endlessly during this period of development. It wasn't helped that most of the people who playtested this version of the game thought of it as rather mediocre. Even though the game was set for release in June, Valve's dissatisfaction and the increasing negative attention the single player was garnering led to Ritual getting the boot that month. From here, work was handed over to Turtle Rock. Valve was already impressed with Turtle Rock because of the latter's work on the multiplayer's AI bots, so the game was once again redesigned and restructured around this AI. This redesign was incredibly similar to the arcade structure that was previously done by Gearbox, and it would be the final design of the game. Another release date was established for November 2003. In yet another instance that would suggest the development of this game was cursed, the game got leaked in October, alongside the Half-Life 2 beta. Nevertheless, the game was still slated for its set release date, but as expected by this juncture, the release window was missed. While it was reported it was simply that the publisher needed to finalize international versions of the game, it was alleged by Valve that said publishers, Vivendi Universal Games, purposely delayed the game, in a later lawsuit launched by the former against the latter. The game would again get leaked in January 2004, however, a month later, the game finally got a release date of March 23, 2004. And after 3 long years of development and being handed off from one studio to another, Counter-Strike Condition Zero was released, this time on the promised date, and the rest is history. Condition Zero is the definitive single-player experience for the series to this day, whether you consider that a good thing or not. But wait a minute, what's deleted scenes? Oh, it's the campaign I was talking about all along, the version that came from Ritual. I thought it got scrapped. Then what the hell is that one that is labeled as Condition Zero? As it turns out, Ritual's version was never completely thrown out, and it was instead turned into deleted scenes. I suppose that isn't the definitive single-player experience after all. So prepare yourselves, as we take a look at the end-all single-player experience of this series. Are you ready, people? I don't think you can handle this. This is Counter-Strike Condition Zero.
Lead on, Command. Good shot, Commander. There's one left. Anyone see anything? T-spawn.
Wait, this is it? This is what Valve deemed to be the game you should play? The great single-player campaign they had so desired to see come to life? This is fucking lame! Well, I suppose while we're here, I'll go over this game mode. Here we have the version of the game that Turtle Rock worked on, the final phase of this game's development. It is vastly similar to the type of game Gearbox was developing, even if it was never explicitly stated that Turtle Rock was inspired by Gearbox. Starting out, we make a profile and move on to picking the game's difficulty. Once that's done, we have a set of maps that we have to achieve certain goals for each one. Once a map is picked, we have a chance to choose some AI teammates, which at the start of the game, you can only choose 1 or 2 with some real shit stats. As you complete more maps, you can choose more teammates, the max being 5, and you keep getting guys with better stats. Once a map and team is chosen, you're dropped into your standard multiplayer map that is practically copy and pasted from Counter-Strike, with the exception of a graphical upgrade here. At the start, you're given your objectives to complete, and you have a chance to buy gear in buy zones, like normal. You always play as counter-terrorists, once again, and in each map, you just need to win 3 rounds against enemy bots. Anytime during these 3 rounds, you also need to complete these secondary objectives, ranging from killing a specific number of bots to completing a round within a certain time. Rinse and repeat, that's the game. Oh, sorry, you can do all this again on different difficulties, with no other variation. How captivating. Now, I was quick to talk so much shit about the campaign for quite a bit of this video, since I thought it was bland. But this game mode here, Tour of Duty mode, is the most uninspired thing I've seen. Now, I will not call Turtle Rock Studios lazy in this case. All they were trying to do was develop a game mode based around their AI work to shove out the door on Valve's orders. But looking at this game mode as the product Valve wanted you to play, this sucks balls. Sure, it is packaged alongside deleted scenes on Steam, and that one is usually determined by most as the definitive Condition Zero experience, so nothing is lost there. Though if Tour of Duty is anything like the version Gearbox was initially developing, it's fucking rich they would call a traditional FPS experience, like what deleted scenes would become, boring. Fuck Valve, fuck Tour of Duty, and by extension, fuck Gearbox.
Keep down, mate. They saw us come in.
That was something. You may think I don't have more to say about this game, but I may as well end off on the most noteworthy level in deleted scenes, which happens to be the final level, since it does have the closest thing to an ending as we're going to get. Like the rest of the game, you play as a CT, SAS to be precise. We get our briefing from a guy that looks like Sean Connery, informing us that a group of terrorists have taken over a high-rise somewhere in Northern Ireland. Worse yet, they have a nuke with them, so we have to break into the building while our comrades provide cover fire. At first we need to sneak in, though we're spotted by terrorists pretty quick, so guns blazing it is. Although the heavy resistance causes my lads to get gunned down immediately, leaving me to go in on my own. Once inside, it's more or less your standard office building, with thugs everywhere, and that's almost no hyperbole either. There's goons in many of the nooks and crannies of this building, ready to ambush at any second. They could be above you, below you, to the side, from a dimensional portal that pops up out of nowhere. You just never know. This challenge is fitting enough for a final level, even if it can get somewhat excessive at times. We take out gun emplacements so our remaining live allies can storm the building from the ground level, and we go after the boss of this terrorist cell. We are eventually knocked out, and once awake, the boss is prepared to put up a fight, one-on-one. He's equipped with a machete, but he has enough honor that he's not going to leave us to bare-knuckle him. There's a knife off to the side we can nab to help even those odds. We treat him to a stabbing before he runs off, threatening to set off the nuke. We reach the floor the nuke is on, which is flooded with more tough bastards, and we got a couple of individual C4 packs to disable before moving on to the nuke itself. God, this part is an endurance test if I've ever seen one. We got goons everywhere, 2 bombs to switch off with their own respective timers, more goons when you thought you've taken them all out, and lastly, the nuke with its lone timer. This section can go quick, though it sure does take me a few tries each time, not helped by more terrorists popping up whenever you think you've dropped all of them already. The game straight up gives you an M60, however, it's still a notable struggle wading through this part. We'll make it in the end. And we do, with the terrorist leader revealing he can still detonate the nuke remotely with the controls he has in his hand, all within his little observation tower that he ran off to. It's okay, we have remote bombs and an obvious support beam to place it on. That does the trick. The tower tumbles over, along with the leader, and the day is saved. The screen fades out and we get credits. And that's the Counter-Strike single-player experience for ya. Mostly. To touch on something I mentioned earlier, we get more missions to play from the world map in the main menu. This screen gives us, well, a world map, pinpointing various missions all around the globe. Along with listing off the missions we already encountered, we get other single missions that can be only accessed from this menu. From what I can gather, these missions don't vary too much from the ones seen in the campaign, but there was no room for them in the main campaign, so they were dumped here. It is indeed more gameplay. Other than those missions, there's nothing else to this game. The multiplayer is there, being practically identical to CS 1.6. As for my personal opinion on this game, it's okay. It was a cool experiment to bring CS to the single-player front. I'm glad it exists, and I've gotten to experience it for myself. That being said, it's not exactly hard to see why this is the only time this series did something different. Kinda like the Quake series, or Unreal, for example, these games are just meant for a multiplayer format. When you give it a campaign, it starts to feel a lot like the original Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Just like Call of Duty, the campaign to Condition Zero is average at best, personally speaking. It is mostly well made, with very basic gameplay elements, which isn't inherently a bad thing. The problem is that the execution wasn't quite all there, but there was an attempt. I can tell that much. Unless we're talking about Tour of Duty, that mode is still garbage all around. It got frustrating at times, and that might have been mitigated if the player movement, speed, and accuracy didn't feel like it was taken straight out of multiplayer and plopped here. Yet whenever the gameplay wasn't painful, it was still too average to ever feel like I was truly having fun. It is a decent time, though it doesn't go far above that for me at any point. It isn't exactly the most replayable game either, but here I am anyway. If you are a Counter-Strike fan that hasn't played this entry yet, I would say it's worth playing once. I'd steer clear of Tour of Duty mode if I were you. At this time, it's likely we'll never see another single-player installment in the series again. Just taking the development hell out of the equation, these games are far more popular as multiplayer games, leaving little to no incentive for Valve to make another story-based CS game. That's fine. There are way better single-player FPS games out there that are certainly worth playing, both old and new. I want to like this game more, if it weren't for how dreadfully average it is. I'm afraid I'll have to stick to more unique games, like Star Trek Elite Force 2. Seriously though, there's plenty of great FPSs available these days that it gets harder and harder to bring myself to replay Condition Zero, which is a perfectly competent game. I've got nothing else now. That's all I've got to say about this game. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for, well, I've done too many shooters lately, haven't I? How about a platformer to spice things up? Yeah.